Hi, and welcome to ProBalance. My name is Ada Wells. I'm a physical therapist and Pilates educator, and I'm also the owner of ProBalance. And what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of information as an introduction if you've never done Pilates before or you've never done Pilates at ProBalance and kind of what makes us different. One of the biggest differentiating factors here at ProBalance is that our physical therapists are all comprehensively trained in Pilates, and all of our fitness Pilates instructors are also comprehensively trained, as well as being used to working in conjunction with our physical therapist with people who are of all levels, whether you're somebody who has come fairly fresh off of a surgery, or you're either still in rehab or you're coming off of your rehab, all the way up the spectrum to people who are Olympic and professional athletes. We've actually treated several Hall of Fame athletes here. So this is something that is that we really pride ourselves on, and it's all about the quality. So when we're talking about the types of things that we're looking for when we're working with movement, and that essentially is what Pilates is. Pilates is basically re-educating movement, training movement, so that when you go out and you add more repetitions, when you add more speed, when you add more resistance to create power in your movement, you're doing it from the right place, and you're creating an efficient pattern that doesn't end up creating wear and tear later on in the body. So with that, what I wanted to do is just to quickly go over 6 principles of movement. These are from the Polestar Pilates principles, and Polestar is who I am an educator through. They're internationally very well-known Pilates teacher training program. Here we're the one of the few West Coast teacher training centers in the area. So if you're interested in that, we do that. But the first principle is breath and breathing. And now that may seem like, hey, hey, we all breathe. But what we try to do with breath is use breath to facilitate the motion that we're looking for. If a person's having difficulty creating some stability within the lumbar spine area, we can use exhalation to help facilitate that. If we want to create more extension in the upper back, we can use inhalation to facilitate that. And we do that with some very specific cueing that really gets the person to create that movement that we're looking for. The second principle that we're looking for is something we call axial elongation and core control. What that means in English is that we are looking to always create a sense of length, a sense of width. So we have this elongation. And when you create that, if you think about even sitting there at home, if you think about sitting as tall as you can, which you may sort of, if you take a moment and just sort of think about, okay, I just did that, and then feel within your body where that came from, that movement or that energy where you just created that length comes from your deep stabilizing muscles kicking in. And this is oftentimes, those deep muscles are anticipatory muscles. And, you're not going to be strengthening, those anticipatory muscles. It's working on being able to get them to kick in when you need it. So, what we oftentimes do, we'll cue the sense of length that helps with that core control, but then you have enough control that you can still create movement. If we were to give a cue like squeeze or tuck, those are sort of the no-no words around here, what you're going to find is you're going to overly recruit, and it's going to be very hard to create a flow or smooth motion, and that's not going to translate well into whether you're doing a functional activity, something like a sport. It's not going to work. You need to have stability with that mobility. So that's the second principle, axial elongation and core control. Third principle we're looking at is something we call spine articulation, and that's basically being able to move within each little vertebrae of your spine. The way the spine works is that it's composed of several vertebrae, and if you're having stiffness in sort of a whole region, like oftentimes people will experience stiffness in their mid part of their back, the thoracic spine, then what happens is you end up creating just excessive shearing forces in other areas of the spine, and this isn't ideal because then if you're creating excessive shear, that's where all your wear and tear occurs. So that may be where you have your symptoms. You may have pain there. However, that may not necessarily be where your actual dysfunction is. We would want to look a little bit above and below that, that segment that's getting, maybe you've gotten the degeneration, you've got, doctor says, oh, I have arthritis there. Well, let's see if we can create movement above and below that segment. So now, instead of all of your movement, whatever you do, a side bend or a motion forward or back, you're not totally shearing at that one area, you're distributing the forces, and that actually should take the pressure and take the symptoms away. So spine articulation is appropriate for most people, and if it isn't, we will typically, there may be some people who we might have to limit that early on, or with certain parts of their spine, depending on what they have for a certain time period. But generally, that's definitely something that we want to be able to encourage, because that's what you need for good movement. Okay, so the third principle, we've got the fourth principle. So far we've talked about breath, we've talked about core control and axial elongation, we've talked about spine articulation. The next one is really weight bearing and alignment throughout the extremities. Now, what I mean by this, if we look at the lower body and you're doing something, say you're doing just a little partial squat, you know, if a person is having, say, some mobility issues at the ankle, the problem is what we're going to see is we're going to see the knees start coming in. The knees start coming in, they're now out of alignment, and that's going to create all the way up the kinetic chain problems. So when we're looking at how you're weight bearing and how you're moving, part of what we're doing is looking to see if there's a structural problem. Hey, do I actually have some joint stiffness at the ankle that we need to address? Or is it just simply you have never had anybody really, you know, tell you where you should be placing your body when you're doing a squat? And we see this a lot, particularly with younger female athletes, where they may have the mobility, but they don't know where they are in space, and so they may actually end up creating an injury with landing after they're jumping, say with basketball players, simply because they don't have that self-awareness of alignment. We can be on the other end of the spectrum where you're somebody who you're, you know, middle-aged, you're senior, you've developed, you know, you've had your old ankle injuries from the past, or you've had some other injury kind of further down the chain, and there may be a structural limitation. And so what we want to do is we want to create as ideal of alignment we can within your structural constraints. If there's something that a physical therapist can help you with, the physical therapist can do that. If it's something that, you know what, it's there, it's stuck, it's fused, we work around what you're able to do, okay? But the ideal thing is to have as good of alignment as we can through the extremities. And that's not only the lower body, but also the upper body. If you're on your hands and knees, and we see a lot of forward head, for example, coming down into quadruped, and I see a lot of this happen, or I see push-ups and people are way down here, that's going to not necessarily create the best position for your entire upper body, which leads us then to the next principle, which is organization of the head, neck, and shoulders. And that organization of the head, neck, and shoulders is very important, whether you are doing something where you're lifting overhead, or you're doing something where you're on your hands and knees, or you're pushing, what we call a closed chain movement. If you do not have good alignment in those areas, then the problem is that I always say the shoulder affects the neck affects the shoulder. It's going to be, you're not going to be as efficient in that pattern. You're going to potentially set yourself up for injury with either in your neck or your shoulder. And like I said, if you're going on to exercises or activities or sports that require you to move much more rapidly and you don't have this good organization, that could be a problem later on. Finally, the last thing that we're looking at within our Pilates movement classes and sessions is really movement integration. And what that means is really putting it all together. You know, you'll find that early on we're cueing. It feels like you're getting, you know, all these messages to do all this stuff, and I'm like, I can't keep it straight. But actually what starts happening is your body starts being able to put it all together and to be able to organize multiple body parts so that when you do move your entire body, it moves, once again, it's flowing, it's efficient. And this movement integration is really, this is function. This is what you need to be doing when you're out and about, when you're getting out of a car, when you're shooting a basket, when you're swinging a golf club. It's about being able to organize the body, it's moving efficiently, you have that distribution of forces throughout, you're breathing, and this is really the essence of what we're trying to do with Pilates and why it is such a great adjunct to your other workouts that you're doing for your own personal goals. So that gives you just a little sense of what we do here at ProBalance, how we integrate those principles. And I'll have some other video podcasts on here that actually show examples of this within specific exercises that you might end up encountering in a class, or, and like I said, if you're working with a Pilates teacher or with a physical therapist one-on-one, you're going to be hearing these types of terms, and you're going to be, they're going to be working with you specifically. And some people have more difficulty on some of those principles than others. So depending on what your issue is, we will make sure that we address it. So with that, welcome to ProBalance. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. It will enhance your session, and we hope to see you soon.